Hello, everyone. Very nice to have this chance to talk about this ecotourism project in Namsai. So in the following hour, Terry and I will do presentations together. So we will take turns to present different sections of this ecotourism project. So I will start by sharing my screen and talk about the context and background of the project. Okay, this one. Okay, so I assume you can all see the screen, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So this is the map of the location of the area. So the study area or the project area is at the origin of the Mekong River. So yeah, and it's on the plateau. It's pretty high. That's where the snow leopards live. So before going into the project itself, I will talk about the context and the background of this specific village. Because for me, I think it's not a normal village with the presence of snow leopard. Rather, this village is quite special. It has many characters that are helpful to make this project happening. So we start from the small village to the national policy. So this village is called Namsai. It's at the origin of the Mekong River. So before the start of this project, there have been several other projects around snow leopard conservation taking place in this village. So the villagers in this area, they know quite well about wildlife conservation, and they have a rather very positive attitudes towards wildlife. And they have been participating in wildlife monitoring, which I saw Pei Yun has just joined this conversation. She takes care of all of the cameras in that area. So this is the village. And for the people living in that area, one of the important income source is the caterpillar fungus. So now it's the caterpillar fungus harvesting season. So every year, like this income can take up to 50% or more of the whole income of the whole family. But the problem with caterpillar fungus harvesting is that the price of this caterpillar fungus is not very stable. So some years they can make tons of monies, but in recent years, for example, in the last year and also this year, the price of caterpillar fungus is very low. So the income drop. So one of the purpose of having this project, apart from conservation of snow leopard and all of the others, is that this can actually be alternative income to the local people. And that one day, if that ever happens, the price of caterpillar fungus drop down, this can help them to support their family, hopefully. And in terms of the local policy, so this area, this village, this county, and also that region has a very strong and supportive local government. And this is also one of the reasons why Shanshui chose to collaborate with this area for a couple of years, because the government officials are very supportive of all of the conservation actions. And yeah, and that's very important. And they use the existing network to help to operate all of these projects, whether it's wildlife monitoring or this ecotourism project. And at the national level, so starting from 2015, China has a new protected area scheme called the National Park. And the area where this village locates is called the Sanjiangyuan National Park, which is the first pilot national park in China, which has received tons of attention from the state level as well as financial support. And this village where the project has carried out is actually one of the model village for this Sanjiangyuan National Park, which means that many pilot projects have been carried out in this area, and the government has been providing tons of actual support to this area. And this is quite important. And also the last point, the collaboration with Shanshui Conservation Center. So I worked for Shanshui Conservation Center from 2017 to 2018. And after that, I go on to have my master's degree. But this project doesn't stop. We have like very new and brilliant people continue to work on this project. And if you have any questions regarding the recent development, you can ask them in the end. And Emily and Pei Yun will be able to provide you the most recent updates of this project. Okay, so this is the brief introduction of the area. And now I will give the mic to Terry. Then he can share why and how this project started. Stop sharing. Terry?
Okay, let's see if I can get this to work. Yeah, can you all see this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great, yeah, so thanks, Yuhan, and thank you to the Snow Leopard Network and in particular Justine for inviting us to present this project today. And I'm really happy to be sharing this presentation with Yuhan, who's been, who should take a lot of credit for getting this project going. She was the one that was on the ground doing a lot of the relationship building and interaction with the local government and community. So it's really great that Yuhan is here. So the origin of the project, I want to take you back to August 2016, and I was actually on my first ever trip to Qinghai, and I bumped into these two Pallas's cat kittens near Qinghai Lake. And you can see I had incredible views and was very lucky to be able to video them. And this was actually on my birthday as well. So it was quite a nice birthday present. And the reason I show this is that just immediately after watching these Pallas's cats, this is the mother coming back, spotted me. I was too close. So I moved back, and she then picked up the piker that she'd collected and dropped it for the kittens. And the reason I show this is that I was just on my way back from watching these cats to get back to the car when I got a phone call from Shanshui Conservation Center inviting me to be a judge at a sort of nature watch competition that they were having in Namsai or Angsai. And I'll just let this finish. He's bored already. And just to say a little bit about Shanshui, for those of you who don't know it, it's an NGO, a very small NGO really, by international standards, founded in 2007 by Professor Liu Jie, who's I'm sure most of you have heard of. She's very famous in China, in particular for her work going back on the giant panda. And Shanshui focuses on the Tibetan Plateau area, and in particular Sanjiang Yuan, which literally means three river source, because it's the headwater of the three great rivers in China, the Mekong, the Yangtze, and the Yellow. And Professor Liu is very, very focused on community-based conservation. So as Yuhan mentioned, they've been working in this area with the local community for some time. And this is a couple of pictures of the locals being involved in the camera trapping. So most of the families in the community have been involved in wildlife monitoring and set up. I mean, they know all the best places where the animals are, where to look. So they're ideal in terms of being involved in the monitoring. And here's a little video of a couple of them setting, that's Yuhan's voice, a couple of them setting up the camera here. So you can see the location as well. It's a stunning place, perfect snow leopard habitat, low population, human population density, and high density of many animals, including many predators. Pretending to be a snow leopard. And so I made my way to Angsai, and I met some of the local people here, and you can see, you know, that as well as the scenery being stunning, the local people, it's very colorful, it's very photogenic. People are wonderfully wonderful hospitality. Some of the happiest people I've ever met. Amazing. So I get to the camp, and this is the wildlife watching competition, and there are teams of people from all over China who've come to join this nature watch. And the idea is that you spend 3 days going out to photograph as many plants, animals, birds as possible. It's a lot of fun. A lot of young people, local people, are hired to run the camp and also to be drivers and guides for each team. Attracts artists and all sorts of creative people who produce this sort of wonderful work. So it's a real sort of festival atmosphere. And some of the special plants, this is one of the blue poppies that is used in local medicine. And you can find these high up on the mountains. Mammals, these are white-lipped deer. There's a very healthy population in this area, as well as other mammals. Brown bear, this is from a camera trap. Asian brown bear, quite plentiful there. And so these festivals, they're really helpful for a number of reasons. One is that they help to get a snapshot of the biodiversity in the area. It's like a bio blitz, as we call it sometimes. And it also helps to raise awareness of the rich biodiversity and a sense of pride among the local community. So for them, of course, this place is completely normal. They've lived there all their lives for generations. And so to have this attention, they realize that they're living somewhere special. It helps to build that sense of pride. And it gives the local people another source of income. So that they're hired to do the camps and to be the drivers and the guides. And of course, the local government is very happy because there's an increased focus on the area, get media coverage, helps the profile of this area. So I get there and I'm supposed to be a judge for the birds. And then the organizers on the first morning, they say to me, oh, we've got these 2 students from Peking University. They're not very experienced at wildlife watching. Would you like to go with them, be part of the team? So I say, yeah, sure, no problem. And being students at Peking University, they were the last to get up. So we were the last team to leave the camp. And all of the other teams went deeper into the valley, sort of more into the wilderness. And so we thought we'd go the other way and find another place. And we found a little side valley, walked in and met this lovely Tibetan family who invited us in for tea, as they do. And we were sitting there drinking tea and eating bread. And it was probably about 11:30, and I was thinking we're really not going to see much wildlife today. And then they said, suddenly in conversation, they sort of asked what we were doing here. So we explained that we were part of this nature watch. And the father of the house said, oh, we sometimes get snow leopards around the house. And we were sort of like, really? Quite shocked. And he said, yeah, they're quite often around. We checked that they definitely meant snow leopards. Yes, definitely meant snow leopards. And he said, okay, when you finish your tea, we'll go up and have a look. Maybe they'll be around. So after our tea, we walk up. You can see where we're heading to, those green hills towards the bare rock. And we probably spend several hours up there till about 3 o'clock. And we scan and scan, and we see a lot of amazing animals, blue sheep, lammergeiers, Himalayan griffon vultures, lots of birds, marmots. It's really wonderful place. And then we sort of realized that we have to leave quite soon, because it's probably about an hour and a half to get back to camp, and we have to be there for the official opening with the local governor at 6. So we do a final scan of the rocks before we start to leave, and suddenly there's a lump on a rock that wasn't there before. And so luckily I have the telescope with me and I'm able to set it up. And this is what we see. And I'll just play this little video. So we're watching this snow leopard for about 45 minutes before we realize that there are 2. So it walks down and joins the second one here. And it was only then that we realized there were two. So the other one had been sitting in full view, just completely motionless, and they're almost invisible when they're motionless. And so we were absolutely overwhelmed to see these snow leopards on the first day of this wildlife watching competition. And the thing that really struck me immediately was how relaxed the animals were. So I always thought that if I saw a snow leopard, I would probably see a tail disappearing over a rock. It would see me first and be gone. And the relaxation of these animals, we were probably about 400 meters away, something like that. And they knew we were there, but they just didn't care. They were completely relaxed. And I thought that immediately spoke volumes about the relationship between the local people here and the snow leopards. And so we get back to the camp, and we have some footage, of the snow leopard. Managed to get some video, as you saw. And I remember saying to Zhao Shang, who's the head of Shanshui's Sanjiang Yuan program, sort of quietly, I said to him, we saw some snow leopards, because I thought maybe they don't want everyone to know, that. And he immediately shouted out, "They saw snow leopards!" So the whole camp knew. And the governor came over and was very excited, and we showed him the footage. And during our conversation, I sort of mentioned to him that people internationally, snow leopard is a really sought after mammal for wildlife watchers, and they pay a lot of money to go to Ladakh usually, and that there might be an opportunity to do something here. Clearly it wasn't the place that was set up for any large scale tourism, but it might be possible to do something very low impact and community based. It might be quite an exciting opportunity to do that. And he was quite interested and asked if I could write a paper about how it might work, which I did. And together with Shan Shui, I developed that paper, presented it to the local government leaders, and they wanted to explore it further. So just to make sure that this wasn't a complete fluke, seeing snow leopards on the first day of one trip, we did a couple of pilot trips with groups of friends in April and June the following year, and both of which were successful in seeing snow leopards. And so it was clear that this was a really good place and not only for snow leopards, obviously for other mammals as well. We'd regularly see musk deer, white-lipped deer, lynx is seen quite a lot. Bear obviously is there. Wolf we were seeing quite regularly as well. So as well as the birds. So it's a really, really fantastic place. And so the local government approved the go-ahead, and we started training for the local people in July of that year, or it was approved in July rather. We did the first training course in September of that year, and then the first sort of official pilot trip in October, before opening the following year. So I think that's where I'll stop for now and hand back to Yuhan, and she can take us through the next stage.
Oh, thank you. I still remember, like, one of the first job I had in Shanshui was to translate the proposal Terry wrote into Chinese and share that with the local government. I would say, like, Terry has a very, very important role in starting all of these, because he is probably one of the first outsider who ever saw a snow leopard in that area, because other people probably won't have that patience and good eyesight. And then after that, he
wear glasses.
he wrote the proposal and really pushed this forward with the local government. So without Terry, this project probably won't start in 2017. Probably couldn't start in 2017, but rather wait for a couple of years. So now I will move on to talk about, like, how this actually operate on underground. So in the very beginning, the village selected 15 pilot families. And so this is the map of the village. So it has 3 small villages and 12 groups. That's how they organize themselves. And 15 pilot families were selected along the Mekong River. And as you can see my mouse, this is the Mekong River. And these families along the river were the first pilot families, because the local government selected the families, not Shanshui. So once I asked them why those families were selected, because apparently many families wanted to be the host family. And one of the explanation I got was that because of their geographical location, they're closer to the river, and also the road is built along the river, so they have a better road access. And also some of the host families among these 15, they have been like the conservation leaders in that communities, so who knows quite well about the wildlife. So we started from 15 families, and then after a year of pilot, the family number was increased to 22, which also covered other families from other villages. Because in the beginning, most of the 15 families were from one village, most of them. But of course, there are 3 villages in the area, and others were quite jealous. So in the second year, the local government selected more families. But then in the third year, the number is reduced to 21 because one of the family didn't have very good review from the visitors. So that family was voted to be excluded by the village. So currently there are 21 families as host family. The reason why it was the local government who select the family is not Shanshui, is because there are lots of conflicts of interest, and apparently every family wants to become the host family because they will be the first one to receive this income from ecotourism. And local government has a better balanced mechanism among these families. So for example, if one family is not selected for host family, but the local government may have other projects that can be given to this family. So in the long run, that will be a balanced situation for all of the families. But of course, it's not an excellent balanced condition. But in this case, this conflict and also this election of family is carried out within the community, not by intervention from Shanshui. And also, I think it's quite important to talk about all of these supports that came from the local government, because this whole project is not run by a typical private company. It's more likely, it's more like a combination of government, community, and also Shanshui, where the community is the main body of the whole project, and Shanshui provides technical support, and the government, the local government, gives permission and also some financial support as well. So here, because this area is the national park, and also the local government has the authority to manage national park, so they will be able to give permission to who can enter the park. And also, as mentioned before, Namsai is the model village for national park. So that also gives legitimacy to carry out these type of projects, which have not been carried out in other places at all. So like the area can take some risk to try new projects. And also the foundation of conservation is quite strong. So it's a good place to start. So as we can see from the photos on the right, these two are the container houses provided by the local government to the first 15 hosting families. Because as we know, the living condition in this area is quite different from what people have experienced in the city. So for some people, like living in a tent or in a brick-made houses, is quite, it's not very comfortable, and to improve their capacity as a host. So the local government used the poverty relief fund from the central government to purchase 15 houses, container houses, to give to each of the family. So this is how the houses look like from the outside, and this is the inside, which also equipped with all of these furnitures. So for the local families, they don't really have to make big changes. They can take good care of these houses, and when the visitors come, they can live in these houses. Of course, there are some visitors who don't want to stay in the container houses, but rather prefer to live in the tents. Okay, I assume that is not a question, but feel free to ask any question if you have any. Yeah, and also the local government provides many training support. So this photo on the bottom right is one of the training sessions we have, and they provide the location. Also, they collect all of the people. Yeah. So before starting all of these, there are two big categories we had in mind that we need to develop. The first one is the regulations, and second one is about the products. So if you look at the regulations, there are several layers because we don't have much experience or previous examples of how to develop an ecotourism, a community-based ecotourism in China. So we have to think about all of these and look at examples from other places and other national parks. So in the end, these are the regulations or management we have come across at different levels. So the first one is a code of conduct for the tourists. So it marks out what tourists can or cannot do. And this code of conduct is the product of many discussions with the local communities and also with the government. So this is the example on the right. So we have this code of conduct in multiple languages, depending on which is the one the visitors use. And also we have everything in Tibetan language because Tibetan is the local language. So these are just some very big categories in terms of the safety, respect to the local communities, and also responsibility to nature, because we don't want to have any negative impact or disturb wildlife because of this project. So that's for the tourists. So every tourist has to read through this contract and signed. And if they violate any of the rules, they will be either punished or invited to go out of the area. And the second part is about the host family contract, because there are also several rules that host families should obey. So this is also the product of several discussions with the local families, and all of the host family have signed this contract as to regulate the behaviors of them among themselves. And the third part is a management group. So in the beginning, Shan Shui is like the middle person who connects with the outside world and the village. But with the development of the project, these families have selected their own village management group, which has started to replace the role of Shan Shui and make this project more community operated. So this management group, they have their own agreements and contracts, and they will take care of the order of which family to take turns to receive the tourists, and also what if someone violates the rules, what will be the punishments. And this village management group is elected among the host families. And for the local government, we have also helped them to develop a serious regulation and authorization because at each level, we need to have a paper or the regulation to show what can be done, what cannot. And this is the foundation for the future operation. And also for at the national park level, I think it was in last year or maybe the year before, this project has finally received the franchise permission from the top national park level, which means this project is officially recognized and could continue to operate. And this is quite important. I think this project is one of the first ever franchised national park project in China. Yeah, so these are the regulation at different levels. And to carry out these regulations and have a good hosting experience, so we also have a series of trainings, and Terry is one of the main talker, a speaker of all of these trainings. So I will give the mic to Terry again. And she'll stop sharing. Yeah.
Thank you. Now I need to share my screen.
Yeah, and if everyone has questions in the chat, I forgot to add in the beginning, you can write now even or afterwards, and we'll talk. We'll have a conversation after the presentations.
Okay. Can't see my screen yet. Here we go. Okay, can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Yes, so as Yuhan mentioned, it was important to prepare the community as much as possible for beginning this, to actually receive visitors. And so we had a number of sessions with them focused on different elements. So we actually did some sort of ecosystem training about what the ecosystem was, the different players, different roles in the ecosystem, the different animals, and obviously they knew a lot about this already. We gave them some examples and experience from other projects around the world that sort of operated on a similar principle in terms of tourism for wildlife, to raise money for conservation and for communities. So we looked at a few examples to give them some context and some reassurance that this wasn't completely new, that this is something that has been tried successfully in other places. We obviously had to also give them some basic medical training. So as they were receiving visitors, some of whom would probably have be on their first trip to China, possibly, that are from overseas. Some may come from sea level, and so there may be issues with altitude sickness. And obviously we were very clear in the guidance that people should take their time to come up to this altitude, because we're talking at sort of 3,700 to 4,700 meters, this valley. So it's clearly in the range where altitude sickness is potentially an issue. So they were taught about how to deal with symptoms, because obviously for them, none of them will ever have altitude sickness because they've spent for generations. So for them, it's something quite weird to see people struggling at altitude. So they had to know how to spot the symptoms and what to do if they saw them. So things like emergency oxygen bottles and those oxygen pillows were made available to the families, and also awareness about where the nearest medical facilities were that could deal with symptoms if they were serious. And also to deal with sort of common ailments like sprained ankles or cuts and grazes and things like that. So a local doctor from the nearest town came in and delivered that training for the local people, and gave each of them a pack which had some sort of basic medicines and bandages and things like that. The local government's chef came in as well and trained the local families about how to cook a whole range of dishes that all from sort of ingredients that are locally available, but perhaps they wouldn't normally have in their home. So it was just to provide some variety and some options. So there were even options for vegetarians. So quite a number of people, particularly that come from overseas these days, you know, that are into wildlife, are vegetarians. So it's important that we're able to cater for those. So that was a fun day in the local government, learning to cook. And then we also took advantage of their knowledge. So this training was very much a two-way thing. So they obviously have immense knowledge about the valley and the specific locations of where to see specific animals. And obviously for tourists coming, some would have maybe focus on snow leopards, some might want to see bears or wolf, or even some of the very special birds that exist there as well. So there are a couple of endemic birds that have a very, very limited distribution on the Tibetan plateau, the Tibetan babbacks and the Tibetan bunting. And so it was important to pool all of that knowledge so that we knew where the best sites were for different species, so that when visitors come, we're able to have that conversation with them about what they wanted to focus on, and then that would determine where they took the visitors to maximize their experience. And so we had a great session putting together these maps of the different wildlife. And we also went out into the field, and we learnt a lot from the local people about the plants that have significance in terms of maybe food or medicine. A lot of local knowledge they were able to convey to us, and looking at the signs of animals as well. So they were really, really expert at spotting different signs. So on the left here, the photo, that little scrape of bare earth, that's a snow leopard, a scrape. So one of the ways they mark their territory, as I'm sure you all know much better than me. And on the right, there's a scratching post for a bear. So that old tree is clearly a regular place for bears to have a scratch if they have an itch. There's quite a lot of hair stuck into some of the bark there. So they were really, really expert at spotting these signs. You know, and this is something that visitors would be very, very interested to hear about, you know, when they're out in the field. To have things like this pointed out to them really adds to the experience. So it was very much a two-way training. So I think that at this point I hand it back to Yuhan to talk a bit more about the materials that were provided to the families. So back to you.
Okay, I guess you can all see my screen. So because of the time, so I will go through the following contents pretty quickly. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the end. So apart from these training altogether, we also carry out several home training with the volunteers living in each of the host families. This is to collect the family information and made this family information handbook, so that if someone is coming to visit this area, and they will know in advance which family they are going to live and what type of situation that family has. So that will make them more familiar with the future condition. Yeah, that's the home training. And also having these volunteers living in their home, they will have a sense of like what outsiders like to live or like to see. So they'll be more familiar with hosting the tourists as well. And here I want to say, like, this project won't be happening without all of the help from the volunteers, because I and another college were the only two Shenshui staff working in that area constantly. And all of these packages or regulations or drafts or whatever were developed with the help of the volunteers. And in terms of the products and packages, and this is actually the second category of the project apart from the regulation. So here are several things we thought that might be interesting to carry out. So the first one is the nomadic life experience, is to experience the life like a herder. And second of that area is the Tibetan Buddhism and cultural landscapes. And of course, the most important one is the wildlife watching. As Terry mentioned before, there has been tons of wonderful wild animals in that area. And also it's a good place for hiking and horse riding. So these are just several examples of the cultural or natural landscape in that area. And this is the materials we have for the tourists. And all of these are also come from the help of the volunteers. So volunteers help to develop all of these materials, including several, I think it's 100 pages or something, guidebooks introducing every aspect of the area. And that is also in multiple languages. And also language booklets, because as mentioned before, local people speak Tibetan, while other people either speak Chinese or English or whatever language. So that language booklets gave translation of some very basic phrases or terms into this multiple language, so that if people do not speak the language, the language that the other one speak, they can use these language booklets to have some very basic communications. Yeah. And in terms of the advertisement, because we didn't have much advertisement of this project in the beginning, because we wanted to start it from very small scale and see how things work out. So here are several things we used for advertisement. And the first one is Nature Watch events, which gather people from all over the places to the area and live in each of the host families. And all of these participants for the Nature Watch events, I would say they are not regular visitors. They are rather experienced wildlife watchers or conservationists. So they will have like a better understanding of what the project will need and what can be improved. And also Shanshui has the social media platform, which has constantly published articles around how this project has developed, or some like beautiful stories or memories from the visitors, so that like people from other places can know this project exists. And also there are several public events. But I think the most important one is the word of mouth, because some visitors had very, very great experience. And after that, they will introduce these places to other people. And I think that's one of the most important resource. And also Terry is very talented. He developed a whole website introducing this area, and also has the registration function so that people can register on the website and then come to the area. Do you want to talk about the website now?
Okay. Let's see if I can share my screen.
And if we can leave time for questions, do you guys think in the next 5 or so minutes?
Yeah, we can.
Terry, Yuhan, sorry, I hate to shorten it, just to make sure also
you have 4 minutes, then I can have the last minute.
Okay, I'll just quickly do this, and then a bit about the way it works for visitors. So this is the website. I mean, Yuhan's very kind, but actually you can do this very, very easily using online platforms. This is done through WordPress, which is a well-known website builder, and it's very, very easy. So we just created a website. It's bilingual, English and Chinese, which has a lot of background information about the place, the families, the wildlife, the project, some pictures from camera traps and things like that. And it also allows visitors to see when there's availability, and they can express an interest through the website, which then flags up to us, or Shanshui, and we can then contact them directly to discuss their visit. So this is a really good way of promoting, and obviously we gave it the nickname, the Valley of the Cats, because that sounds much better than Namsai or Angsai to people that don't know anything about it. So anyone searching for big cats or Valley of it's just easy to remember, and obviously gets a lot more attention. So just very quickly, the way that it works for visitors, if you want to come and visit, it is a sensitive area. It's in a national park, so permits are required, and we have a strict limit on numbers. which we wanted to, this was deliberate, you know, at the start, because we wanted to monitor the impact. So we have a maximum of 12 people at any one time. Yuhan's mentioned the code of conduct, the activities that people can do. You know, obviously the snow leopard is the jewel in the crown, but there are other activities you can do. There's a strict rotation of the host family so that each family gets an equal opportunity to benefit from the tourism. And importantly, all of the revenue from the tourists stays in the community. So the way the community decided to break down this revenue is that 45% of the revenue for any given group of visitors would stay with the host family. 45% goes into a community fund that is spent according to a community committee that is set up, and that could be for public goods, it could be for healthcare, for elderly people and so on. And the final 10% goes to community-based snow leopard conservation projects in that area. And the price, because of this, there's no sort of commission going to the government, there's no commission going to Shanshui or any other middle person. You know, the price is very reasonable in today's tourism circle. So it's only 300 Chinese yuan per person for food and accommodation, and 1,000 per day for the vehicle and guide, which you can split with up to 3 people. So, you know, if there's 3 of you, that only works out at sort of 633 yuan per day, all in. And obviously there's no other costs while you're there. This is a picture of the horse riding. You can see there can't be many better places in the world to go horse riding. The night sky is just phenomenal. If you're interested in the night sky, there's just zero light pollution except for the Shanshui's workstation. But you can ask them to turn out the lights and then you get it completely dark. And if you're really lucky, of course, you might get to see one of these. And this is just a short video taken last July. This is a female at noon hunting. She just failed to hunt to catch a Himalayan marmot. You know, probably only 150, 200 meters away from us. So it was an incredible experience. Quite, yeah, we normally think of snow leopard being on these barren rocks, you know, and it's perhaps not so much in the flowery meadows, but in the summer they often hunt marmots when they have cubs. I think it's it's an adequate food, maybe more manageable for them to take back for cubs. And there's a couple of reactions from visitors.
I don't think I can hear the voice from the video.
You can't hear it?
It's okay, we can see it. That's fine.
And this group just saw their first snow leopard and then a rainbow came out. So this was pretty magical for them as well. And then just to sort of sum up before Yuhan does the final bit. So it's been going about basically 2 years if we discount the first half of this year. Obviously, there's been no visitors because of the COVID crisis. But as at the end of 2019, we'd had 98 groups visit the valley, including 302 visitors. And we'd just broken the 1 million yuan mark in terms of revenue for the community. Yuhan mentioned that it was awarded the first ever concession for a community-based tourism project inside one of China's national parks. And so the project has been supporting local incomes, raising money for conservation and giving tourists the experience of a lifetime. And at the same time, it has been contributing to policy development on China's national parks. So China's going through the process, or has been, of building up its policy for its national park system, which is due to be launched this year. And so this project has shown that there's an alternative to the normal mass tourism that happens around China's national parks. So in areas where the environment is sensitive, you know, this shows that there is an alternative model that might be appropriate for those areas. And I think, yeah, as you have mentioned, there are special circumstances for this project that make it work here that perhaps wouldn't necessarily be in place in other places. or at least in many other places. But I think what it does show is that it is possible, and that there's a blueprint there for places that have those characteristics that potentially could be followed in other places. So I'll leave it there just for Yuhan to.
Yeah, one last page. So usually like our presentation will stop here because there's a very beautiful picture of the project. But because Justin has told us that people in this webinar are very experienced wildlife conservationists and may want to develop a similar project in their area. So here are a few initial and ongoing challenges and difficulties faced by this project, which we think are quite important to talk about. So the first one is the selection of the families, because every family, or most of the families, wants to be the host family. So there have been some conflicts. And second one is the unbalanced capacities. So among the 21 families, some of them are really, really good at spotting snow leopard, and they can have like a 99% spotting rate, while others are, well, not that well. So for some visitors, they're more likely to go after the good guide and the 100% guide. But then the rule of the community is that we have to rotate the family equally so that everyone has an equal income. So that's a potential conflict as well. And also there's the entrance control, because as said before, other families also want to host people. So there has been some very secret groups coming in without the permission from the national park in the beginning of this project. I think the situation has been better because now the community has their own contract controlling which family can host, which cannot. So yeah, it's better than the beginning. And also the language barriers, as mentioned for a couple of times, people speak Tibetan, where the visitors don't usually speak Tibetan. So sometimes the communication is not very smoothly, and which lead to other questions if they cannot communicate well of what they want to say, what they expect. And also expectation. Some people come into the area with only one expectation, that they want to see the snow leopard. Though like spotting the snow leopard is quite easy in that area, but still it's not a 100% thing. So if people has a super high expectation, but then don't see the snow leopard, then they will have a quite negative feeling. Sometimes it does happen, which is not very nice. And also the snow leopard watching sites are not distributed equally. So some families are closer to the watching sites, and while others will take up to 2 hours drive. So there have been some complaints among the visitors. And conditions and facilities, because the living condition in that area is quite different from the city. So some visitors may have time to adjust to the condition. But we have already set all of these situations and conditions in their pre-arrival and also guidebooks. So there need to be some work done before the arrival of the visitors so that their expectation is more aligned with the reality. And the last one is the distribution of the income. So as Terry mentioned before, 45% of the income should go to the community for the overall expense. But like for the community, one very high proposal is to allocate that money equally to each of the family. But in that case, the original purpose of using the money in a public spending is quite lost. But so far they haven't decided of how to distribute the income, the public income, that pot. So there will be more community meetings going on to discuss how to use that money. Yeah, I think that's our presentation, and thank you for your time. And feel free to ask any question.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Yuhan, Terry. So before mentioning, I want to tell everyone that Pei-Yun is here. So many of you guys met Pei-Yun in Bishkek, and she also continues to work on this project, so which is really nice. And I forgot, I'm sorry, we started in the very beginning. I totally forgot to introduce you guys. So Yuhan is with Shangshui, and she was at the project initially. And Terry is a conservationist in Beijing who works more with policy level and also, conservation on the ground. And he's been there for over 15 years or so. And he has a website called Beijing birding. He's also a big birder. But anyway, so just to give you guys some background on who they were. But I hope that we still have around 15 minutes for discussions. So I bet everyone has a lot of questions. I see already Kustub is using the Zoom hand up thing where he raises his hand, because we want to encourage people can either write questions in the chat or actually ask the question through video. So Kustub, go for it.
Thank you, Justine, and Johan and Terry, wonderful presentation. There's so much to learn there. Really, really appreciate it. I just have two very basic questions, kind of built around this wonderful model. So one, it's more of a lesson, is what is the typical proportion of national versus international tourists? And a related one, I might just ask just after this one, if you would be able to have some idea about what are the, how are the tourists divided into these categories, if at all?
Yuhan, do you want? I think I know roughly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, certainly in the first year, my understanding was that it was almost exactly 50-50. So it was about half tourists coming from outside China, many of whom are coming to China for the first time, and specifically to look for snow leopards, and 50%, domestic wildlife watchers, mostly conservationists. Actually, people that were working in conservation have an interest in China's wildlife. So it was about half and half. Last year, I got the impression that it was possibly slightly more international visitors, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
I'm wondering if Emily is here. Pei Yun, is she with you? Because Emily is the person who is operating the project right now.
Yes, I'm here. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Yeah. Hello. Actually, Xingno, one of our other colleagues, has just done a very thorough report and analyze about the tourists. So I'm just looking at the data. I'm pretty sure that the first year, as Terry just talked about, is around half and half. And this year, 2019, the tourists from within China has increased quite a bit. Sorry, I'm just need a minute to factor the data.
So can I just ask a related question while you're looking for the data, Emily? The reason I actually asked this is that there's a historical pattern of cyclic tourism related recessions, right? Around 2000 there was one massive recession. Around 2010-12 there was another recession. Currently we are facing, or we will be facing, another recession. So I'm just curious to know if you're already thinking, or if you have thought through the means to kind of build some resilience around these dips, which can sometimes be pretty substantial. And suddenly, from a very good level of income, a lot of entirely tourism-based economies can suddenly face a massive crunch. So there are various mechanisms people use, like, kind of building a little recession kitty, or working through some packages and all. But I'm just curious if you guys have thought through, and what have you thought through about those potential periodic cyclic patterns that are likely, unfortunately, going to increase over time with climate change and other such
as COVID. Yeah, COVID is has a huge impact on the area.
COVID-19.
Yeah. I think, as mentioned in the very beginning, the tourism income is currently not the major income for the local people. So the impact on the local economy is not that huge. So even if there are some fluctuations, it won't be a very big problem as long as the income from the caterpillar fungus still holds. But it will become a problem if in the future the price of the caterpillar fungus drop. Yeah.
Yeah,
Have you
I
found
think
the
it's
figure?
Thank you.
there is a risk about dependency. You know, if communities become dependent on tourism income, then I mean we're seeing that right in other places around the world now. In Kenya, for example, Uganda, places that really rely on wildlife tourism for a significant part of their income, and it really hits hard when these kinds of recessions happen. So I think it is something that's important to take into account in terms of the planning for this project going forward. You know, sort of trying to ensure that the community is not dependent on it. That this is one part of, you know, a broad income from different sources. And I think, you know, they have their caterpillar fungus, obviously. Yeah, their costs are very low. Their living costs are very low. They don't pay rent or mortgages or you know, school fees and things like that. So their cost of living is very low. And so this, at the moment, this is, you know, it's sort of supplemental income for them, traditionally. And I wouldn't think it would change that much, to be honest, because the capacity, you know, is not great. It's not like we're going to be having, you know, coach loads of people coming in every day. It's just not the place that can cope with that. It's too vulnerable, too sensitive. So hopefully, I think, you know, I think it will continue to be an additional part rather than become dependent on it.
Thanks. And I have a question from Ajay, whose mic is still broken, and he's asking related to the principle of aptness, and thinking about how the inclusion, like Yuhan, you mentioned that only sometimes some of the community is included, right? So not the whole community. And I think Pei-Yun shared with us in Bishkek that there are around maybe 300 households in the entire, all three communities or something around that. And this is just a very small proportion. So that fund that you talked about was meant to try to be more inclusive on including those other households, the benefits. But he was wondering, have there been like a lot of negative impacts related to community interactions or within the community? Did it lead to many conflicts, and how your teams dealt with that, or are there any recommendations you can suggest for dealing with those issues?
So before answering this question, I'm wondering if Emily has found the figure.
Sorry. Yeah, all right here. So there were like, oh my God, I just lost it again.
All right, I can answer this question first. Then you. So yeah, so Shanshui didn't select the families, but rather the communities and local government themselves do. The reason behind is that for the communities and the local government, they have many projects. And this ecotourism project is just one of them. So if some families are selected and benefited from this project where others are not, the others will have the chance to benefit from other projects. So in the long run, so the overall balance of the whole community is not broken by these single projects, because there are many other projects that can balance the different interests. And also among all of the income, 55% belongs to the family, the hosting family, and the other 45% belongs to the hosting family, and the other 45% belongs to the whole community, which means that these 45% will be shared either by giving money to each of the 300 families, or by using the money to purchase the insurance or whatever public expense for the whole community. So in that sense, every family does benefit from this project. But if you are the host family, apparently you pay your labor and you spend your fuel for the car, you will receive more. And for other families, they will receive the public part. So it is still an ongoing challenge and problem, because apparently more families want to become the host family because they can make more money. So I think the plan is we start from very small scale. And if it is successful, and also if the market demand is big, then it is possible to expand to more families. But if not, we will rather keep it small. And yeah, I think that's my answer. I'm wondering if there are any comments from Terry or Emily.
As you guys add the comments, I see Fuji is just asking a related question related to who decided this small number of households and then the number of tourists for this area, how that was decided, whether it was through governments or tourists or, you know, the local community. So maybe you can add on that, well, if someone else wants to answer.
I'll let
Okay,
Yuhan go first.
Yeah. And also, I read there's a question from Ajay. So this project actually started from nothing. So we don't have any experience. And also the local government didn't have any experience in this type of things. So so in terms of the number, so we have a couple of meetings. We had a couple of meetings with the communities and with the government to say, okay, let's start it from a very, very small number. That's why we limited the number to 12, because that's roughly the number of 3 to 4 hosting families, depending on the size of each of the group. And of course, that area can host more than just 12 or 20 people. I would say 100 will be okay, but that's a bit too risky to start because families are not very mature or very experienced with hosting these tourists. So we started from a very, very, very small number. And that is basically decided by a couple of meetings between all of the stakeholders. And in terms of the advertising, so I will say in the beginning, Shanshui did have a quite big role playing in advertising and linking the travelers with the families. And even now, Shanshui is still kind of like a middle person where the tourists register on the website that Terry developed, and Shanshui pass on this information to the local management group, and then they will arrange which family to host. So Shanshui is more like an intermediate person among all of these. And the future plan is that if the local community can have some younger generation who will be able to speak the multiple languages or who is very experienced with using all of these internet tools or communication tools, so that is the time when Shanshui will be replaced finally. Yeah. And the local government, they are more like the a supervision role. So each of the permit is issued by the local government, and also they will arrange meetings with the local families if there are any issues happening. So they are not directly involved in advertising or linking with the travelers, but they are behind everything.
Yeah. I would just add, sorry, I'll just very quickly add that I think that the aim of this project is to make it completely self-running for the community ultimately, and obviously there's a capacity building element to that to get there, and clearly one of the most difficult is this language barrier, for connecting between the community and international visitors. There are 1 or 2 young people in the community who do have some level of English. There's one guy who recently married the daughter of one of the families who speaks very good English. And so potentially he could be trained up to be the website person who can link between the community and the outside world. And that's certainly an aim that we had right from the beginning, was ultimately that this project would become self-sustaining, self-running without, with Shanshui and sort of taking a step back. But obviously that capacity building and support is needed initially to get it off the ground and build towards that.
Thanks, Terry. And Munip, you were trying to say something or had a question?
I think Rupert has a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Hello, everyone, one more time. Thank you for this great presentation. I really like it. It was a good tandem between you guys. So my question is, to what extent in the beginning the local community were active in building this project? Did they believe in this project, or you are trying to convince them?
I would say they were super active. So even if the first 15, okay, so how to say this? So I said in the very beginning, so this community has involved in multiple conservation projects. So they know conservation is a good thing. And many of the families are active players in all of the other conservation projects. And they do like animals and wildlife. So for them, it is something that combines their interest as well as generating income. So even if in the very, very beginning, they are very, very active into participating in this project. And because we have another project called wildlife monitoring. And in that project, each family is taking care of a camera trap, and Pei Yun probably knows this project better than I do. And from what I have understood, even if that role doesn't get paid by Shanshui, but later get paid by the local government. But in the beginning, it was not a paid job. But like local people are still super active in becoming a person who take care of a one camera trap because they believe it is a good thing. Yeah, so it was very active in the beginning and also I think until now.
Thank you. One more question. So you talked about the maturity of local families who can host the guest or not. So how did you check their maturity in terms of whether they are able to receive the guest or not? And the second question is also how are you going to solve this problem, or how we are solving the problem is language, English. I mean.
Okay. So I can talk about like the maturity of the families in the first year, and if there, and Emily, please feel free to jump in at any time to talk about the current situation. So in the very beginning, I would say most of the families didn't really know how to host people from outside because like they are super, super friendly, but they may not know what kind of food or what type of habits people from outside will have. So several things we did in the very beginning. So the first thing is before hosting the tourists, we had a couple of volunteers who lived in these families for, I think each family for 3 days. So one purpose was to collect information of these families, and the other one was to have this process of getting to know like how the families would host friends from outside, and also for the families, they would have a sense of how people from outside is like. So that's the first process. And also we had a couple of pilot trips, and most of them were with Terry. So Terry has led a couple of groups of people who came to these areas and lived in different families. And after these pilot trips, we would collect the feedbacks from these groups, asking what do you think that can be improved. And many of them are very valuable feedbacks because they have their direct experience, know what can be improved. And the third thing we did was to host the Nature Watch events. So that was a large scale watching events because at the Nature Watch events, all of the host families were hosting visitors from outside. And after that event, we have collected another round of very valuable comments. So this type of pilot has helped greatly to let us know what can be improved and what should be designed. And many ideas like the materials, the language booklets, and the guidebooks are the outcome of these feedbacks. And I'm wondering if Emily has anything to add.
Okay. Yes, thanks to Yuhan for a very thorough introduction. So I just want to add some few points as the project going. So the local people, the community, they are super hospitality. Like they like people and they like to treat people with their whole heart. So whenever you go to a house, they always like try their best to make you feel comfortable. And as this project continues to current, one of the things is that the facility here is still like not to city standard or to modern standards. So it's still a very basic situation here. Most families at the beginning, they don't have toilets. And that was like the biggest problem for all the tourists. But now I think at the end of last year, I went to a few families and they have all built their own very basic toilet, but it's like it is a private area where people can feel comfortable to use. So I want to say that people here, they're trying everything they can to do what they can to improve the situation. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would just add that I think the cultural aspect of this project is a really interesting and positive factor as well, because I think one of the things that, certainly from international visitors that come and stay here, one of the biggest things they take away is their cultural experience of staying with a Tibetan family. You know, they just so enjoy the hospitality and seeing how they live and all the 3 generations in one house. And, you know, they really, really fall in love with the people. And I think also the local people there really enjoy experiencing other cultures, people coming from other countries and, you know, seeing the difference between Americans and Brits and Italians and Australians and whoever else. Yeah, I think they really enjoy that as well. So this cultural exchange that happens as part of this project, I think is a really valuable element that certainly visitors really, really value when you get their feedback.
Yeah.
And regarding English.
Okay, regarding the language. So I will add one more point to Terry's remarks. I remember in the very beginning, in a couple of meetings, the head of county has talked about this for many times. So in his speech, he always mentioned, please don't treat them as outsiders or visitors. Treat them as your family, treat them as your friends. I think that's very important to set the tones of this hosting process. And regarding the language barriers, so we have a couple of language booklets in Chinese simplified, no, in Chinese, Tibetan, and English, which list out the very basic phrases that people will use to communicate. So that's for the language part. And in terms of the wildlife, we have provided each families a wildlife watching book, which has all of the species living in that area, as well as a huge poster, which they can hang on their wall. So on the poster, there are pictures of each of the animals that present in this area. And under each photo, there's the name of the animal in multiple languages. So if the visitor does want to see a certain species or a certain animal, he will point the poster and then the host family will understand, okay, so that's the target species this person wants to see. But of course, this is still an ongoing process. So we are currently previously we were trying to fix the problem or fix the language barrier between simplified Chinese Mandarin speaker and Tibetan language. That's the barrier for the national or internal visitors. And the host families themselves have come up with a good solution, because the older generation in that area don't usually speak Mandarin, or they don't speak that perfectly. But the younger generation, for example, like their sons who have some education from the Mandarin school, will be able to speak Mandarin. So whenever they're hosting, they will either ask their children to come back, or ask their children to participate in the hosting, or ask the children of their friends who are currently in the area to come and act as the translator between the guide and the tourist. So I think that's a very useful way. We also thought about whether it is possible to hire to recruit volunteers to be the translator. But that didn't work out in the end, because there's the limit capacity of how many people each car can carry. And also it's quite difficult to find a volunteer who knows the area super well and will be able to stay in the area for a super long time, because training one volunteer takes a lot of efforts and time, and not everyone has the time to stay in that places for long. Yeah.
Another thing that people use, which seems to be really effective, are these new translation apps, you know, on their phones. And the technology's advanced so fast. From when I sort of first came across these a few years ago, you know, you'd say something and it would come out something completely different in the other language. But now they're really, really quite good. And we've had several people, you know, who are English speaking with no Mandarin at all, you know, using these to communicate, and they've been able to do so very effectively. So these modern translation apps are also something to consider and to recommend for people when they come, because that can really help as well for the sort of non-straightforward stuff that we have on those cards. You know, the very basic phrases. Anything beyond that, I think these apps can be very good.
Thanks, guys. I also see Byra has maybe unmuted herself potentially for a question, and we actually have already gone over time. So I think Byra will be the last question, and then I might ask Juliet, who's also here, to give a few last words, and then we might end, if that's okay. It's so interesting to have these conversations. And we maybe, if you guys can write your emails also, well, we have it in the group chat, but we'll have to continue this conversation after. But go ahead, Byra.
Yeah, it's very interesting, really interesting project, David, and thank you guys for doing this great presentation. I have one question. I just wondered that what kind of mechanism you guys have in order not to have too much interference with wildlife, you know, not trying to disturb wildlife. Maybe when people start, you know, having more income, there might be like a tent baiting snow leopards, so you know, so that they can show more snow leopards to tourists. Is there like any mechanism you guys have, maybe in your conservation contract or something? Thanks.
Do you want me to answer that? Yeah, certainly. Yeah, bad behaviour, you know, is a risk, I think, when you have a project like this, because there will be pressure on visitors who come, particularly photographers, who, you know, this is probably maybe their only holiday of the year, and they really want to get a photo of snow leopard, so they're prepared to, you know, push the boundaries to get their pictures, and certainly that is something we considered right at the beginning. And so to try to minimize that risk, you know, we obviously, part of the code of conduct that visitors have to read and sign when they arrive is about not approaching the animals to within 200 meters, you know, not to run up the mountain chasing wildlife, things like that. And we've been also very clear about this risk with the community as well in the meetings that we've had, and where we've discussed the guide training. You know, they really shouldn't agree to any requests to do anything, you know, to push those boundaries. And one of the ways that we've also done that is to recommend no tipping. You know, so we're quite strict on clients or visitors coming in. You know, it's not allowed to give extra money to guides. So if you know, because I think this is something that has happened in other places, you know, somebody rich will come in and say, you know, I'll double the fee that I'm paying if you can guarantee me a snow leopard, or if you can tie up one of your yaks, you know, for us. So, I mean, I think it's very hard to police 100%, but I think there are things that we can do to minimize that risk, and certainly that's something that we've had in our minds right from the beginning, and we have taken steps to minimize that as far as we can. And the community, I think, also self-police this in a way. So, you know, if one of the guides or families behaves badly, they'll be spotted, or, you know, it's such a small community, they'll get known. You know, it's a big area, but word gets around, you know, if somebody does something bad, and so the community will will deal with that kind of behaviour. But yeah, thank you for raising it, because it is an important issue and a risk that we've certainly, you know, still there now, even though we've taken those measures. But I don't know if Yuhan wants to add anything.
Yeah, I agree with all of your points. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Farah. I know that's a great point, because even in Western Mongolia, that's what they're facing as well, some baiting and some issues like that. So, so thank you guys. It's already been, we went over. Thank you for staying, and for everyone for staying to listen. Obviously, it was very interesting, and I'm sure IRC Ulugh has another question. So if we can be in touch with you guys, continue. I mean, Shang Shui is a SLT partner, so we will. I mean, we know Pei-Yun and Emily. Thank you, Pei-Yun and Emily. If we can keep talking with you guys too, because there are programs potentially in Kyrgyzstan, Mongolia, that are being developed. So the fact that, I mean, your project, the community ownership is really, it's a nice example of that. But also, I love how Yuhan, you explained which we call in the partners principle is the presence. You know, you guys were there before with your community conservation, and you have a kind of a base there for your teams. So your teams are there almost 100% of the time, interacting with the communities, interacting with the local government, and how that's probably really important to ensure the success of the project. But I also loved what Terry said about the respect as well between, you know, the tourists, the local people, and that interaction. It was like the cultural respect and making sure that all together, you know, kind of police each other. And of course, there needs to be safeguards, but those are really nice take-home messages. And just last part that I think maybe Terry didn't highlight too much, but I remember he talked to me saying he was going to highlight about how this project is maybe bringing young people back to the mountains, right? I mean, a lot of people have left to the cities, but they're potentially coming back to support it because they realize there is some potential future for them in these mountains and supporting their families with the language. So anyway, I just wanted to say thank you so much. And I don't know if you guys have two last words you want to say before we leave. And then maybe, yeah, we hope to invite you guys again to speak and talk more.
Okay, I'll say something and then Yuhan can have the last word. So,
sure.
Yeah, just on your point, that I mean, that was something that I felt it meant a lot to me. Two young guys said that this project had given them a reason to stay. So that a lot of young people do get pressure to earn more money and go to the city. You know, a lot of them do that obviously willingly, but some of them don't want to leave, but they feel pressure to. And so having this extra income and this extra role, this job in the community, really made them feel more comfortable in staying, and that's what they wanted to do. So there's two young guys told me that, and I thought, wow, that's a nice effect of this project. Unintended positive impact that some young people felt sort of motivation to continue their traditional way of life in this community. So that was very rewarding.
Yeah, I really like that, like this unintended outcome as well. I remember like in the beginning, it was like the father generation of each family who came to the training sessions. And then after a year, like there are more young people coming to the trainings and start to become the guide of their hosting family. I think that's a very positive sign. So some final words to say. I would say it's not easy to start these projects. So we have been through many difficult times, whether it's with the communities or with the visitors. But in the long run, I think it's a very good project and it's worthwhile all of the efforts. Yeah.
Pei-Yun's just got the figures, or Emily is just.
Yeah, more foreigners last year.
60% foreigners, 40% Chinese.
And there's go for it, Emily.
You're saying?
Do you have any last words, Emily and Pei-Yun, for us?
Yeah, Thanks so much for this presentation from Terry and Yuhan. Actually, there was a lot of information that I had. It was like my first time to hear about how the project was actually initiated. Although I'm currently working with this project, but it's very, very interesting to know all the background stories and all your hard works. And thank you guys so much for this project.
I'd just say thank you to Emily and to Pei and all the Shanshui staff who are amazing. I think Shanshui is a wonderful organization. It's full of young, energetic, committed people who do amazing work.
You, right?
I think the future of conservation in China. So it's been a privilege for me to work with them, all of them. So thanks.
Great, thanks. And we have a few other questions on the chats. Maybe if they don't answer it, maybe you, Munib and Ulukbek, you guys can email to the group or to them. They're in that email chain, and we can try to answer them. But otherwise, we'll say goodbye. And we don't want to say goodbye. Obviously, everyone's here, but we'll have to say goodbye because we have other meetings. So, bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
哦，他这个是他设时间的，到时间就会。